In December 2015, at 23 years old, Katie Locke had everything going for her. Living with her parents in the Essex suburb of Buckhurst Hill, sports mad Katie was a much loved daughter and sister, with lots of friends and a real energy and a zest for life. She'd recently graduated from Southampton University, where she'd worked hard, but also found plenty of time to party and play sport, especially canoeing. Now, Katie had managed to secure an excellent first job teaching history and politics at a school in East London. With a demanding job, a close family, and a wide circle of friends and plenty of interests, Katie didn't get too much free time. But like so many of her friends, she did sign up for free dating sites. In Katie's case, it was Plenty of Fish. On Plenty of Fish, Katie was inundated. But there was someone who stood out. He was handsome, he was bright, and he was very interesting. His name was Carl Langdell. Even better, 26-year-old Carl lived close to Katie in Waltham Cross in Hertfordshire with his parents. He had a really intriguing background, having spent a year working for a hotel group in Moscow. Academically, he was good, he'd progressed well, studying business at Cardiff University before taking a master's in journalism. He told Katie how he was currently studying law and had just registered his own legal firm, Langdell Legal Associates. Carl was clearly ambitious. He had big plans for professional success. And away from work too, he seemed to share many of the same ideals and values as Katie, expressed via his blog, Ordinary Decent Human, it was called. The content he produced on this blog included poetry and humanitarian appeals on big subjects such as female genital mutilation. He also posted a large number of pictures of himself online with some public figures, including Boris Johnson, who at the time was Mayor of London. Katie and Carl got on really well online, so they agreed to take the next step and meet up in London, and they arranged to go to Hipster Central, Shoreditch in East London. On December the 23rd, an excited Katie got ready and travelled to meet Carl at the trendy, there's only trendy bars there, trust me. Its bar was called Traffic. The date went well, very well, as they talked, they laughed, and they drank. Katie's friends, as good friends do, looked out for her, and she texted one of her friends during the evening, Rosie, telling her just how well the date seemed to be going. By 2 a.m., the pair were decidedly tipsy, and they decided to take a taxi to their Theobalds Park Hotel in Hertfordshire, close to where Carl lived with his parents, just off the M25 there. But this wasn't some romantic fairy tale. Carl was in such a state in the car that the taxi driver had to stop a number of times so he could throw up by the side of the A10. He wasn't quick enough a couple of times and he was sick inside the taxi, which meant that when they arrived at the hotel at 3:30 a.m., Katie had to pay the driver not just a £65 fare, but also an extra £80 to pay for his car to be cleaned. The receptionist remembered the couple well. Both had clearly had a lot to drink, and whilst Katie paid their £115 bill, Carl was moaning, saying, "I shouldn't have had those shots." The receptionist heard from the couple just one more time about half an hour later, when Katie called asking for toothpaste and brushes to be sent to the room. Carl checked out at noon the next day, having put a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. It was Christmas Eve, and Katie's family were super excited, as on Christmas Day they'd planned to reveal that they booked a surprise family holiday to Disneyland. But with Katie still not home by late morning, her family were becoming increasingly worried about her. It was totally out of character for her not to let her family know if she wasn't coming home, and she wasn't answering her mobile. This concern increased when they realised that Katie hadn't been out with her friend Rosie as they'd thought, but had been out on a first date. Of course, in our social media age, it's easy to trace people. And at 11:56 a.m. on Christmas Eve, one of Katie's pals messaged Craig on Facebook, asking just where Katie was. He replied, saying he got no idea where she was. She'd got a taxi back ages ago. He said he tried to call her, but her phone was off and her battery had died. And as the day progressed to the afternoon, Katie was still not answering her phone. Until at one point, someone did answer her phone to one of Katie's friends. But this wasn't Katie. A man answered in what seemed to be a breathless voice. He asked them to repeat their name, and then he whispered Katie's name with very long, drawn out breaths before sending the call to the answer phone. Now, in a real panic and sure that something awful had happened, she Googled the picture of Carl, finding his business address, which was registered at his parents' home. The friend told Katie's dad, who drove there straight away. Unsure what to expect, he was greeted by Carl's mum, who told him the most devastating news that any parent can hear. She said that Carl had returned, not himself, from his evening out, adding, "I am a monster. I've killed a girl." Katie's dad couldn't quite believe what he was hearing, as Carl's mum continued that her son had told her, "I put her in the ground. I wrapped her up in a quilt. I put her in a trolley." Carl wasn't there, as he had taken the family's dogs for a walk. Katie's dad called 999 and they quickly picked up Carl, who instantly admitted murdering Katie. When he underwent formal questioning at Stevenage Police Station, Langdell told detectives that he was a narcissist who was unable to feel any empathy. Speaking about murdering Katie, he told officers, "She didn't even fight. I expected her to hit out or something." Her body was quickly discovered by police, dumped and wrapped in blankets from the hotel, in undergrowth next to a skip at the building, which is a Grade 2 listed Georgian mansion set in 55 acres of parkland. As detectives traced exactly what had happened, what they discovered was shocking. Katie had been strangled in the early hours of Christmas Eve, at the end of the pair's first date. But sickeningly, Langdell had sexually abused her dead body, also taken photographs on his phone, before he'd wheeled Katie from the hotel in the laundry cart and then just dumped her, showed no respect for her body. And then just before he checked out of the hotel at midday, he contacted an ex-partner, Diana, who'd been seeing for a few months after meeting her on the dating site Tinder. Diana too had previously spent the night with him at the same Theobald's hotel. He confessed that he'd killed someone. He told her they couldn't be together anymore because he'd been in prison for a long time. It's quite hard to imagine, isn't it, how Diana must have felt. The shock and revulsion. She immediately ended the call and deleted all his messages and contact details. Worse was to follow. Why was he even free to murder Katie? In 2009, he was cautioned for assaulting a girlfriend, and in 2013, he was regarded as a risk to himself. He assaulted his brother in 2014, and he'd killed Katie just 3 weeks after being convicted at Bristol Crown Court of threatening to kill 2 women 9 months earlier. On that occasion, he'd been detained under the Mental Health Act at a Bristol hospital and been given a 9-month jail sentence suspended for 2 years after confessing to deeply disturbing fantasies about killing and then sexually abusing young women, in particular, the younger sister of his girlfriend who he lived with. He had told his girlfriend that he was going to call her before, during, and after the act, as he wanted her to understand the reality of his threats, and then asked why he wasn't locked up for saying those things. He also threatened to kill a mental health worker. At his trial at St Albans Crown Court, Langdell pleaded guilty to murdering Katie, sexually assaulting her, and taking pictures of her. The court heard that he'd told Katie at his own law firm, but in reality, he'd spent the previous 2 years suffering increasingly severe bouts of mental illness. After his arrest, he described himself to a psychiatrist as a monster. Poor Katie's family sat distraught and sobbing as Langdell spoke about how he'd killed Katie in a sex game that went too far. This account was absolutely dismissed by the court, but once again, I suppose it's his lack of empathy. Katie's family and friends sitting there in court, and he put them through that lie. Oh, so bad. In victim impact statements, Katie's mum told how her daughter was a ray of sunshine. She said, "I'm grieving for my beautiful daughter. for the happy child she was, for the lively, beautiful, noisy teenager, for the lovely young adult, and mostly for the woman I'll never know. Her dad looked at him in the dock and told him, "On the internet, you said you're an ordinary, decent person. You are ordinary, but you are not a decent person." The judge called him a monster and a psychopath as he handed down a minimum sentence of 26 years, doubting he'd ever be released due to how dangerous a threat he posed to women. As usual in similar circumstances, there was an independent review to see what could have been done differently and to look at lessons learnt. Regular viewers and listeners to my podcast will know I look at these with utter dread, as I just want to see people actually taking responsibility and personal accountability. An independent review commissioned by NHS England found systemic missed opportunities, including a lack of information regarding Langdell's previous care. However, it concluded there was no way for staff from any agency to determine whether he was one of the 97% of people who only make threats or one of the 3% who carry threats through. We conclude, therefore, it said that the tragic death of Katie Locke could not have been predicted with a degree of certainty that would have made it possible to prevent. The Hertfordshire Trust Executive Director of Quality and Medical Leadership, I'd like to say, resigned due to the failures, but no, of course they didn't. Instead, they said, there are a number of areas where the Trust can and will learn lessons from this terrible incident and minimise the possibility of this ever happening again. That's all right then. Langdell was soon back in the news when he attacked a prison officer who would not open a cell door. The prison officer said, "At the bottom of the stairs, he walked aggressively to me and he punched me in the right eye. He got me in a headlock and tried to choke me. I was thinking he was going to kill me." Luckily, other prison officers arrived and restrained him. He denied causing actual bodily harm, but was found guilty by the jury and sentenced to an extra 3 years in prison. So there we have it. Katie had everything to live for, and like thousands of other people in the UK that week, went on a date with someone who sounded very interesting online. When Katie met him, he was in contact with around 20 other women. When she went back to the hotel after a great date, she could never have guessed that she was alone with an absolute monster, and her final moments must have been absolutely terrifying. If you found this video of interest, please do watch one of my others. Until next time, I've been Adam Lloyd.